Here's a question that sounds simple but gets strange fast. What did you do today? Woke up, maybe scrolled your phone, went to work, came home. Now strip all of that away. No job, no phone, no schedule. You are a human being 12,000 years ago and the sun just rose. What do you actually do? Most people assume prehistoric life was one long, desperate scramble for survival, but that assumption is a time capsule waiting to be opened, and what's inside surprises almost everyone. The story most of us carry goes something like this. Ancient humans were brutish, exhausted, constantly hungry. Life was short, nasty, and consumed entirely by the hunt. Then agriculture arrived, civilizations bloomed, jobs were invented, and finally, humans had something to do with themselves. That's the textbook version. Here's the thing, the archaeological record tells a completely different story. Here's what nobody tells you. Hunter-gatherers, based on decades of anthropological fieldwork and analysis of surviving forager societies, worked somewhere between 3 and 5 hours a day to meet all their basic needs. Not 8 hours, not 12, 3 to 5. The rest of the day was theirs. Archaeologists are now extracting volatile organic compounds from soil samples to reconstruct ancient smells, revealing not just what people ate, but how they lived, what rituals they performed, and what their daily sensory world actually felt like. The evidence buried in the earth is a time capsule, and we are finally learning how to open it. My name is Jordan, and I am genuinely obsessed with the question of what ordinary life actually looked like before history decided to write itself down. Not kings, not battles, just people waking up, figuring out the day. Think about it this way. Every brick and floorboard of an ancient campsite holds the routines and relationships of the people who lived there. The spine of this story is one question. If survival only took a few hours, what filled the rest? The answer reshapes everything you think you know about human nature. Let me describe a typical morning in a Paleolithic band of maybe 25 people. A few adults go out to gather roots, berries, small game. This takes a few hours, rarely more. Back at camp, someone is knapping flint. A meditative and skilled process that produces tools, but also produces something that looks a lot like craft. Children play in loose, unsupervised groups. Elders talk. Someone is almost certainly singing. We know this because musical instruments, bone flutes, percussion stones, appear in the archaeological record tens of thousands of years before agriculture does. Music came before farming, art came before writing. Cave paintings at Lascaux date back roughly 17,000 years, and they are not survival manuals. They are galleries. Here's where it gets interesting. Anthropologists who studied the Khoisan people of the Kalahari in the 20th century, one of the last forager societies closely observed before modernization, found that adults spent about 15 hours a week acquiring food. The rest was conversation, storytelling, dancing, sleep, and what we would now call socializing. Their social lives were not a luxury added onto survival. Social life was the survival strategy. Reputation, alliance, information sharing, knowing who had seen water, who could be trusted, who knew how to treat a snakebite. The campfire conversation was the internet, but here's the kicker. We need to be careful about projecting one group onto all of human prehistory. Ancient genome analysis reveals that almost all human populations are not pure rooted groups. They are mixtures from multiple migrations and constant movement. Daily life varied enormously depending on climate, landscape, and season. What the evidence consistently shows across sites from Europe to Africa to Southeast Asia is this: humans had time, and they used it. You'd think constant movement meant no attachment to place. The record shows the opposite. Ochre-stained burial sites suggest deep mourning rituals tens of thousands of years old. You'd think life without jobs meant life without structure. But forager bands had elaborate social rules, gift economies, and dispute resolution processes far more nuanced than a simple hierarchy. You'd think ancient people barely had time to think. The crazy part is they may have had more unstructured leisure time than the average modern office worker. And you'd think the invention of agriculture made life easier. In fact, skeletal remains show early farmers were shorter, had worse teeth, and worked longer hours than the foragers who preceded them. Agriculture gave us civilization. It also gave us the concept of a brutal workday. That shift from flexible foraging to regimented farming data is the hinge everything else swings on. Once you have fields, you have harvests to protect. Harvests create surplus. Surplus creates inequality. Inequality creates administrators, soldiers, priests, and eventually the palace economies of the ancient world. The clock-driven workday isn't a feature of human nature. It's a feature of that one agricultural pivot roughly 10,000 years ago. The time capsule buried in that soil contains a reminder the scheduled, surveilled, productive workday is the historical anomaly. The long evening by the fire was the default. So, what did ancient humans do all day? They foraged for a few hours. They made things, tools, music, images on cave walls. They talked a lot. They slept more than we do. They maintained the relationships that kept everyone alive through the hard seasons. The record doesn't show people desperate to be busy. It shows people who had developed over hundreds of thousands of years a life with deep pockets of stillness built in. The mythology of endless prehistoric struggle turns out to be a projection, our modern anxiety reading itself backward into the past. What's actually in the time capsule is something quieter and stranger and a little humbling. If this made you reconsider something you thought you knew about human history, there's a lot more buried in the record. And this channel keeps digging. Subscribe so you don't miss the next excavation. Every video is another time capsule opened.